continuation of sorts in the discussion of the previous video, which I just shared in the discussion of the Rastafari. We explained to a certain degree the experience of the Lion Man, which is as a result of the stimulus or the experience one experiences through the consumption of the burning bush, which is known as marijuana, which results in the awakening to a higher sort of things. And upon awakening to this higher sort of things, such as God, you could imagine the mental capabilities. We now see that even in my finishing understanding that now woman has to create a balancing faith. In the burning bush itself, we see a split in actual essences itself, which you see in sativa and indica, which they themselves are of a masculine and feminine energy. Now, when you stimulate each of these different energies simultaneously or individually, they create different physiological patterns. In an indica, you would essentially stimulate the indicouch effect, where you feel at rest. The indica effect is the feminine energy that seeks to create from. Because in the indica, you find that your cells enter a anabolic rhythm where you can actively regenerate from or grow from, which the anabolic rhythm is only stimulated upon a increase of indica or an estrogen-like compound, which means you have to first create a catabolic reaction, which means as a result of an indica, if you as a male were to consume primarily indica strains of marijuana, or if you learn to cycle strains of sativa and indica, as I will further explain, sativa gives a stimulant effect, an increase in testosterone, where you see now in both the female and male physiological hormones could have been as a correlation based on the initial divide of masculine and feminine energy harmonic resonance found within the consciousness of each sex, which then created a duality once again within each sex. And then we see the rise of what is known as being considered two-spirited, where we see people clinging on to every little thing that they think makes them of opposite polarity in their experience, because in reality the true spirited of the two-spirit person is simply an obsession disorder, to the point you're literally obsessing over every little thing about your experience. And now you see their neuroticism. In order to understand things, you have to gain perspective over it, which means you have to beat it. And in the neuroticism, we might see the pride of man as a stature of strength, but we can also see it in a point of weakness, because if we as men are continuously seeking to achieve a stance of power over each other, I would argue that that is a reflection that we feel powerless in our own essence. And when we find our power, we can change things around ourselves. Now, in understanding the energies of the two burning bush compounds, indica and sativa, you derive the separating hormones that develop, you could say. Imagine if a woman is pregnant at this particular time, if you induce more sativa during pregnancy, it will develop as a girl. If you induce more sativa during a pregnancy, it will induce the development of a boy. And you might say that sounds evil, and yet you would be surprised that that type of treatment exists in hormone treatment therapies to convert developing human fetuses into the opposing sex, because the couple specifically wanted the opposite sex as an offspring. And we see this being talked about specifically in the rise that when you look at the reproductive health now of people that have abused levels of testosterone or estrogen in their lifetime, whether it be through a birth control or a steroid, in the shutting down of their natural process began, how would I put it? In the shutting down of their natural process began the therapy of specifically implementing the sex of the offspring you were going to pursue in the embryo, which is done through artificial insemination for humans. And this is a legitimate thing. We are actively doing this. Now we might question, well, why do we see a rise in potentially transgender people all of a sudden? Because we're playing God too much as people. You cannot mess with creation by creating synthetic processes, but you can learn to control creation naturally. The more you learn to look at the nature rather than seeking to create a chemical business upon that nature. And in the understanding now of the separation of the masculine and feminine energies, we can see the true medicine also found present within that burning bush, which is known as CBD, which in itself helps rebalance the two previous states. Because essentially, folks, what psychosis is simply a change in your hormonal levels between dopamine and serotonin, between estrogen and testosterone. And when you can change that particular state, you then see changes such as blood sugar levels and insulin release. And all of these little other things are correlated to the same physiological process, which you can all control by utilizing one particular plant, the burning bush, marijuana. Marijuana is the first initial medicine. It contained absolutely all forms of treatments we could derive to help in our human healing. and the treatments that first begun of understanding the spiritual journey brought by the marijuana plant, the burning bush, the consumption of the spirit of the bush, of the actual plant, of the bud, the smoking of it would result of, in essence, the burning of the bush would rise your consciousness to a higher state, a stimulant, where now in the higher state you have to rebalance. And in the rebalancing, you reach your equilibrium. And in the equilibrium, in the second creation, the second division, from stimulant to reversal, the opposite direction, from assertive to invertive, we see the rise of personality traits such as introverts and extroverts. And all of these different stimulus of personalities are divisions of ones and twos and zeros and ones and zeros and ones and zeros and ones in genetic matter, which DNA is stimulated in its generation by one particular compound, the cannabinoid. A cannabinoid compound specifically helps the formulation of genetic matter. And in the formulation of genetic matter, you increase the rate at which you experience a perspective over said genetic matter, also known as a lens. This is what is called the high, where you perceive things in a different way. This is based on the serotonin and dopamine you regulate with, the estrogen and testosterone, and on and on and on and on. But essentially, through one particular plant experience, the stimulus of all of these particular processes result in one particular thing. The experience known as feeling as God. And the more you increase the resonance of the high, the more powerful you feel the experience of God, which is all a stepping stone in the experience of substances known as fruits of knowledge. And marijuana is the most innocent substance which arises an individual to the sensation or feeling as one with God. Which begs the question, what the hell are we experiencing beyond just marijuana? That in itself, I won't dive into, just because for the safety of the public and understanding the experience itself. The world is not ready to understand the realm of spirit yet. I can only make you aware that there is a alternate light that which shines another kingdom. And the mind is the bridge to that kingdom. And when we find that in taking on the burden of our lives and carrying it until the moment when God Himself releases us, not by our own doing, but by his own hand and releases us of life, and we are then brought before the angel Michael, then we may potentially be given the opportunity to enter said kingdom of light, a new reality. And this is all something people learn through the experimentation of substances, which gave the arising of what is known as the experience of the mystique, the mystical, which created the religious belief of fundamental values and understandings of the way we know, we experience our interpretation of ourselves as the highest aware self on this planet Earth. We are human, but to what degree do we truly understand the basic fundamental truths of a human experience? And that is where, in my practice of sharing these videos, is my hope of being able to share that particular perspective, that lens, once again, where in your own understanding now, when you perceivably feel yourself arise in your experience of a highness, where you enter a slightly higher resonance state, you may now understand some of the things you are experiencing within yourself, which give you, as a result, this mental health struggle, because you are simply unaware of the true spiritual aspect of the experience of the mind. And in that notion,